That's okay. That's okay. That's a fine thing to be. It's great to meet you. Thank you for taking a minute out. And I'd love to begin our conversation with
Yeah.
living through the pandemic. You know, we're getting on the 4-year anniversary. How did you get through it, and how did it change you?
Yeah. Well, wow. It's actually kind of mind-blowing that it's 4 years.
I know, isn't it?
Right. Yeah, because I don't even feel like we're fully out of it. But I can say that for me, it was a pretty drastic pivot for me, both personally and professionally. On a personal level, my mom, um, just because we were concerned with her health, we were very, very vigilant about, taking all the precautions and even the way we shopped, right? All these things changed for us. And I still, am a devout Instacart user now just because of that. I think I just got kind of conditioned to do that.
Yeah.
uh, but like on that level, yeah, definitely took a lot of precautions, and then, just with, professionally, my career took a pretty significant pivot during that time because I had my own firm. And when everything shut down, that impacted all my clients. And so, um, pretty much overnight, the well dried up, right? And so then I had to pivot to, W-2, from 1099 to W-2, and supporting myself in that way. And I'm fortunate enough in my career where I could kind of do that pivot. And then now just out of it, pivoting back, right? Back to, where my kind of my strike zone, which is, doing my work. I reopened my company and, was able to really hit the ground running. So I would say in that regard, I really wasn't impacted too much from a business standpoint other than really having to pivot and navigate. But I'm fortunate enough in my career where I can do that fairly
So
easily.
let me get to the essence of what you do for a
Mhm.
living. You know, there's one
Yeah.
thing on paper being a strategist, but it's better to be explained. I'm going to put you in front of a bunch of third graders at career
Uh-huh.
day, and one of the kids says, "Hey, what do you do for a living?" How do you answer
Yeah.
that child?
Well, this I get this all the time from my
Okay.
my second grade son, so this is perfect. He says, "What do you do?" When he explains what I do, right? He says, "My mommy goes into broken organizations and she fixes them."
Okay.
Right. So I'm often brought in when something's just not working effectively, and figuring out better ways to do those things. Usually that's related to public sector or regulatory, work. But as we kind of zoom out now post COVID, what's broken isn't a particular organization, it's the systems, right? So it's affordable housing, it's digital access. And how do we connect those dots and fix those systems? That's what I do, right? And so I'm usually brought to the table to figure out, from a more systematic perspective, how do we do that, and how do we bring the right people to the table to solve those problems as well.
So what's been the most mind-blowing thing about being a part of this system of trying to fix things? What was the most eye-opening part of this?
I think and I've been in government and politics for now, coming about 20 years, and I think one over 20. And I think one of the most mind-blowing things to me is how significantly egos get in the way sometimes of really like simple solutions where we actually know exactly what we need to do. And some are just not willing to do it because whether it's they don't get credit for it or they have an upcoming election, those types of things, sitting at the table and those being vocalized, it's really heart-wrenching for me because it's like, come on, this is what we're here for.
You know, I just read or listened to Michelle Obama's book, and I was listening to that part when she was talking about when she met Barack and how he was
Mhm.
kind of aspiring to get into politics and he read all the time. And I think about all of the things that I've known about them and that have shined through. He
Mhm.
genuinely was trying to create
Yeah.
tiny pebbles that would become large
Mhm.
boulders. And you
Right.
just don't see that spirit of governing. happening in our political system at
Yeah,
all. I mean,
yeah, yeah.
the House
Mhm.
can't even decide how to tie a shoe, let
Right, yeah,
alone walk in them.
yeah.
You know what I'm saying? I mean, we have
Yeah,
gotten to that
that's a fair
dysfunctional place.
criticism. Yeah, I think we're not incentivizing the right things.
Yeah.
Right. And I think I would agree. And I worked under both Bush and Obama administrations, right? And I there was a pretty significant pivot in terms of coming to the table and a spirit, it was like the last hurrah where, collaboration was kind of hanging on by a thread and it just popped. And it was like, where do we go from here? Because now it's very obstructionist by nature.
Yeah.
And we've really lost sight of a lot of things, So, like you said, easy answers, right? Like, can we just move the needle a little bit? Incrementally, how do you eat an elephant kind of thing, right? And now, unfortunately, I don't know if there's always that type of approach or tolerance, for that.
So let me ask you this.
Mhm,
Take me back to where you were born and raised and how these seeds of getting into a a mindset of wanting to help fix
mhm,
the political and governmental system that affect the people on the ground. How did
mhm.
all of this become seeds that grew into who you are today?
Yeah, well, I'm a Air Force brat, right? So both my parents served a combined 50 years in the Air Force. So I think public service has always been near and dear to my heart. I grew up just surrounded by it, right? And so there was always that love for country, but at a deep level, right? Not at a political level, but you're here to be useful and have some purpose. And then my mom, we moved off and we also went through some hard times financially, and so I grew up in a community once we left the base where I saw people struggling, right? And I saw the realities of the disparities of people's experiences, because I was growing up in a lower income community, not a lot of access to things. And so it was just really, it irked me, right? It was
Yeah.
like, this is, here I was, I considered, even then testing really high, intelligent, but I just didn't have access to things that other kids did. And that really frustrated me. So I think I made it kind of my life's purpose that others wouldn't experience the same barriers, or if I could ease those barriers, I would definitely do that. And so that's kind of where my career started, was doing work like at the county level, right? Like going out, I used to do harm reduction services. I worked for Section 8 office, which is now, the housing voucher program. We don't call it Section 8 anymore. Those were my first jobs,
Yeah.
right? Whereas people working at McDonald's, I was like, I want to work with, people that need rental assistance, is that kind of, career path. And then I just ended up getting plucked up. Some people saw some gifts, unique gifts in me and said, we need you at a higher level. And that's where I transitioned into the federal government. And the rest is history. So
Yeah.
then I just kind of went on this trajectory and my
Yeah.
career, very fun career, but I'm always thrown in right when the fire's like, a 5 alarm fire. And I just got good at really doing that. Yeah.
How
So
do you acquire that skill? Because you have to have good instincts, good pivoting, good ways of like just what is that about running into a burning building?
yeah, what's funny is when I look back, I think there's some things that are we acquire over time. And I think some things are certain giftings, right? And I think from a very young age, I was able to look at things very differently and start making these kind of connections. And it's funny, I look back and I tested really high on this called like matrix analogies when I was really young. And I said, oh, so that all makes sense now, right? I could connect dots that other people were really confused and intimidated by.
Yeah.
And then I think also just my people, human skills. I think I come across very, very genuine. The rest of it had to be acquired, right? It's
Yeah.
learning, certain industries. I've worked in water rights. I worked for Homeland Security. I've worked in digital equity. I mean, I've worked in infrastructure and renewable energy. I mean, just, those things I've had to learn, but I've had to learn them very quickly. And so I think that how do you get to that is just getting comfortable with being uncomfortable,
Yeah. Right.
right? And knowing your blind spots,
Yeah.
right? And then that's the other part that I knew when to bring other people in, right?
Yes.
I don't have to solve everything by myself. And so I've been
Totally.
really fortunate in that I've always had really good people around me
Yeah.
who, in my 20s, I was a leader. The people that worked for me were twice my age, right? But they were fantastic, fantastic people that trusted me and I trusted them.
So speaking of leaders, who's been kind of a hero or an inspiration for you?
Well, I'm biased because I worked under them. I would say Michelle Obama, who I've engaged with and I have a tremendous amount of respect for. Um, it wasn't easy what the load she had to carry. And I think, no offense, Obama gets a lot of credit, but I think, in the background, she was really doing a lot to kind of help move this country forward. And then I would say my other before President Obama, Colin Powell was always someone I deeply admired. And he's had to navigate a lot. And he's kind of played that role where he's been kind of that glue between the parties, what's best for the country was always front and center, rest in peace. But he's definitely someone who, from a distance, I allowed to mentor me. Mhm.
So you've obviously met high-powered people, been around a lot of high-powered people, but if you
Yeah.
could meet one person alive right now on the planet who you really like, who would it be? Who would you love to meet?
Oh man, that's a hard one. Who would I love to meet? Um, oh my gosh, that's a really, really hard one that I haven't met. Um,
We can circle back to this.
let's circle back around
Okay.
on that one because then I have to qualify by who I haven't met, and that's a
Yeah,
that's a that's a little challenging
that's
for me.
fine. No, that's fine. So let me ask you this. What is the motivation every day for you to wake up and to do the work that you do? You're running into really intense situations, and you
Mhm.
also have to evolve as a human being yourself. So what is the ultimate overall motivation for you to be you and to do the work you do?
I think because I truly believe I'm changing lives, right? And I think about at that most, singular level, the people that are impacted, whose lives are changed in little ways, right? Like so when I do rental assistance programs and affordable housing or business grants, which is near and dear to my heart, that's keeping a business afloat. Well, that business owner has a family, right? And that has a significant impact. And I think in politics and government, we zoom out too far all the time, but you have to constantly do both. You zoom in and then you zoom out and you look at, at scale the impact you're having.
Yeah.
But then you zoom in and you look at that individual who's tears in their eyes, like you don't know how much, this means. This is legacy for me. This is my life. This is a roof over our head. This is internet access for my child so they can participate in their academic, you know, um, you know, career and all these things. So those things are deeply, deeply important to me. Right now I'm helping a domestic violence organization and getting grants for them to do training for those people who are right on the ground, homeless women who are victims of domestic violence. I mean, when I'm old and gray and I'm able to say, you know what, did your life matter? I won't have to hesitate.
Yeah.
Um, so.
So when you look at all the projects that you've been involved with,
Mhm.
what is the one project that really puts a smile on your face, a really good success story?
Yeah. I would say for me, it would probably be the work that I'm doing with the domestic violence organizations, right? I think that's really heavily impactful. And it will transform our services to those communities. and more specifically, more trauma-informed services. So we're talking about law enforcement, we're talking about social workers, that thing that really, really warms my heart. On the flip side, one that really puts a smile on my face, that's probably not as warm and fuzzy, is the work I did with renewable energy. And it puts a smile on my face because when my son used to explain what I did, he said my mom plays in trash all day long. And I try, I'm like, I didn't actually play in trash. We turn trash into energy, waste
Yeah.
into energy, but then at the time that 4-year-old explanation to it was really, really funny. Everybody thought I drove a garbage truck for a living.
Yeah. We live in a world where people are pretty jaded about how politics works just because it's so
Mm.
politically divisive from the top.
Right,
But
right.
you're on the ground level. If there's
Mhm.
anybody out there that's curious about the work that's really being done, as far as you and what you're doing, and as far as others that are out there trying to make a change, what would you say to people to convince them that what the federal government is doing is beneficial and is good and is really out there to help the people?
Yeah, I think you have to follow the money, and I have this conversation all the time. We get there's so many sound bites. And Obama said this after he left office. He said, we're in a post-truth era, right? We don't really chase after truth. We chase after the dopamine hit of like anger and frustration and things like that. But if you look in your community, and you see these programs like affordable housing programs or the affordable connectivity program, these things, if you follow the money, all the money's coming from the federal government, right? We are just the hands on the ground that are distributing those funds. But if you actually follow it, that's where ultimately it's coming from. And so the small business grants, the small business loans, all these different things, so it's not all bad. It's just what gets the most attention because no one really wants to feel good anymore. We all want to be angry and frustrated about something. And is
Yeah.
that healthy? No. So,
Yeah.
no.
So let me ask you this. If you had a dream tonight, you ran into the senior in high school version of you, and you
Mhm,
could give that young version of you a piece of advice based on the wisdom you've gained in your life, the
mhm.
things that you've seen and overcome, what advice would you impart on that young version of you?
I would tell her to keep going, because I think that that's kind of been the echo, in my ear this whole time. It's not easy, right? And I think on so many levels, I just had to learn to trust myself, and that's probably there's a lot of times I walked into a room, and it's a big room, and these are big titles, and I'm like, how on earth are they handing me this kind of responsibility, And I just had to learn to trust myself. I'd walk out, you can do it, and I did.
Yeah.
Right. And so trusting that process was something that I had to learn. And so I would just keep telling her to do that, because some of the trip ups, I wouldn't take those away. Some of the areas where I made mistakes, I have no regrets. Like I think all of those I learned from them, I grew from them. They made me better at what I do. So I would just say keep going because I wouldn't change a single part of the trajectory that I've been on.
So of all of the things that you've done, overcome, and evolved
Mhm.
into, what are you the proudest of?
Mm. I I I think I'm the most proud of often I was the first. When I say first, sometimes I was the youngest, sometimes I was the only woman, sometimes I was the only woman of color, the only person of color. And I can say that I walked into a lot of rooms where I was the first, but what I'm most proud of is that I made sure when I walked out I wasn't the last. And so that's kind of the legacy that I've left behind is that I've climbed, but I've also lifted, other people. And I'm so extremely proud of that.
So instead of the question of who you would want to meet, I'm going to ask you this.
Okay.
We get off this call, a time machine pulls up into your house. You
Hmm.
can go to any place in history and see an event in human history with your own eyes. Where are you going to go? What do you want to see with your own eyes?
Oh man. You know what? I will say, and it's probably gonna sound really stereotypical, but the March on Washington, I would have loved to be there, because spending time in DC. I've gotten to sit there and be in that space, and the spirit of that day is still so heavy in that space. And it's like, if it's still like that decades later, I can only imagine like the ground has absorbed this energy,
Yeah.
right? And I would love to have been there and have been a part of it.
So everyone has a perception of you, family, friends, clients, colleagues, but you
Mhm.
run the show. What's
Yeah.
your perception of you? Who do you think you are?
Oh, you know what? I'm a connector, and I'm a problem solver, and I'm someone that's fiercely passionate about making this world a better place. And I think that's kind of my brand, is passion. And in any part of my life, if anyone knows me, so you would get no arguments there.
So if anyone wants to learn more about you, reach out, anything about
Mhm.
your world, how can they do that?
Yeah, well, they can certainly reach out to on my website, www.coxswainconsultants.com, COXSWAIN consultants.com. And you can learn about the work that I'm doing. But it's also I'm also helping a lot of nonprofits and small businesses, you know, be that translator for them in terms of government grants, but also government contracts. And so if you want to help solve some of these problems, there's a lot of money to do it and not enough hands. So please feel free to reach out to me.
Excellent. Julia, this has been wonderful. Thank you for your story. Thank you for your
Thank
time.
you.
Keep doing the
Thank
great
you.
work. I appreciate it.
Thank you so much, Joe. You have a good day.
You too. Take care.